Hi, I'm Hillary. Welcome to Teaching Moments. So October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and that's a topic that's close to my heart because all 4 of my kids have dyslexia to some degree. So as a matter of fact, that's why I started this channel, is to help parents that have students with dyslexia, or to help teachers or even people themselves who have dyslexia to understand it better and understand how they can learn better. So today I wanted to cover some frequently asked questions about dyslexia. And along the way, I'm going to share my journey with you of how I discovered dyslexia with my kids and some of the paths we've been down and how we discovered some of the answers to our questions. So I've got some notes here. So if I look down, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, so first of all, let's define dyslexia. What is dyslexia? Well, I want to point out these on the back, on the board here. These are links to websites where you can find out more information about dyslexia. I put them on the board because I often forget to put things in the description below. I will try to remember, but at least you have them on the board if I forget. So the top one is Susan Barton's website, and Susan Barton is the creator of Barton Reading and Spelling Curriculum, which is one of the Orton-Gillingham curriculums used to help teach dyslexic students how to read and spell. And there are several different kinds of Orton-Gillingham curriculums out there. Barton Reading is just one of them, but Orton-Gillingham is what you want to go with when you are teaching a student who has dyslexia how to read or spell. And I can get into a little bit more about that later. But to define dyslexia, I was looking at several different definitions because there's a lot of different definitions out there. Susan Barton has several of them on her website, but I'm going to take them simple. So according to Susan Barton, a simple definition of dyslexia is an inherited condition that makes it extremely difficult to read, write, and spell in your native language, despite at least average intelligence. So yes, I did say inherited. So the dyslexic mind happens before a person is even born. It's just the way that your mind is formed. So it is inherited. We see it in if one person of the family has it, chances are other people will have it too. And actually, out of the population of the United States, 1 out of 5 people are affected by dyslexia. So it's 20% of the population has it. Many people don't even know that they do. So what are the signs of dyslexia? When I was starting this journey, I just thought, oh, it's the BD confusion, thinking a B's a D or vice versa. It's that, and then it's also like flipping words, seeing words backwards. That's basically what I thought it was. And that's partially true, but not even close to the whole truth. So there are lots of signs of dyslexia. If you go to, again, the same website for Susan Barton, there is a nice sheet here of the warning signs of dyslexia. And I love how she does this because it's got in preschool, in elementary school, in high school, and then in adults, because it is possible that you can get to adulthood and not even have known that you've had dyslexia all this time. As a matter of fact, most dyslexia hasn't been one of those things that's been diagnosed. When I was in school, people my age might not even realize they had dyslexia because they weren't looking at that really at all. It's not till recent, I don't even know. I can't say how many years, but I know that when I was a kid, they weren't looking for it, just like they weren't looking for ADD or ADHD. So it is very possible to be an adult and have dyslexia and you never knew it. So let me just mention a couple of them. Oh, by the way, so you can go to Susan Barton's website and find this list. You can also go to understood.com, or this one here is Dyslexia IDA, which stands for the International Dyslexia Association. You can go there and find a list as well. And then every state should have their own dyslexia association that's kind of headed up by the international one. So if you just plug in your state name and put Dyslexia Association, you should be able to find your state's Dyslexia Association and where that is at, and maybe a head person to be able to contact to talk about some of these things. Okay, so let me just read a few. Like in preschool, they could have delayed speech, mixing up the sounds and syllables and long words, difficulty tying shoes. So it's not just with words. Can't create rhyming words. That was a clue for one of my children. Has, I think, mild, but actually as I've been looking at her now, I'm realizing she might have it to be a little bit more severe. You can have mild, moderate, severe, and profound. Those are the levels of dyslexia, but I think she might have probably more moderate. But she couldn't rhyme very well when she was little, so that was a clue. And then a close relative with dyslexia. In elementary school, they have terrible spelling, extremely difficulty learning how to write cursive. When speaking, they'll forget what things are called and call them whatchamacallits or thingies, or, they just don't remember very well. Extremely messy bedrooms, backpacks, and desks. As I stand in front of my children's desk, and one is extremely a mess. Yes, it's true. Okay, in high school, all the other symptoms plus like a limited vocabulary, extremely poor writing expression, difficulty reading printed music, and unable to master a foreign language. Foreign languages are difficult for people with dyslexia. In adults, you can be a slow reader. You have to read the page 2 or 3 times before you understood what it says. You have difficulty putting your thoughts into words and putting it down on paper. And also directional issues like knowing left from right. And you could still, even as an adult, have BD confusion. So that BD confusion, that is very normal for kids when they're like in kindergarten. But if they're still having it like in 3rd grade, then that's not as normal. So just because your child does have some of the symptoms doesn't mean they do, but it's, so my next question, because I'm going to kind of get into what I was going to say, but what do we as parents need to do about it? And should we get the kids tested? Okay, so here's what we as parents should do. We need to advocate for our kids. First, we need to research into dyslexia and maybe what they have, because there are other things that have those same kind of symptoms, and it can look like dyslexia, but it might be something else. So make sure you know what it is so you can treat it properly. Be patient with your kids, no matter what they're dealing with. Please try to understand them and be patient with them. Do not call them lazy. As a matter of fact, kiddos or students, people who have dyslexia have a more difficult time reading, and they are working extra hard just to even read a little bit of what they're reading or spelling. And the person who's just going real fast, that doesn't mean that they're not, just because one person's going fast and another person can't go that fast or doesn't want to read the book, doesn't mean that they're lazy. It just means that it's really challenging for them and they need help. So please be understanding, be patient with them, advocate for them if they're in public or private school, advocate for them if you're homeschooling them. Please know what it is that you can do to help them out. Make sure that they're getting the best education possible. So if you need to get them a tutor, or if you need to make sure that they're getting accommodations in their school, please do that. Those are things that we as parents can do for our children who have dyslexia. Testing. Do we need to test our kids? Well, that is a really good question and one that has come up often. It depends on what you want it for. Maybe. So let me go through my story here. Let me go through a little bit of my story. So my oldest child was learning how to read, and I could tell 1st and 2nd grade, she kept skipping the easy little words like it, the, of, and moving on to the other words. And I'm like, why does she keep skipping these little words? Well, that is also a sign of dyslexia. I didn't really know it. And then, yes, she did have BD confusion, some things get turned around. There's also PQ, can be difficult for them. My kids, M and W, that way was difficult for them to remember which one was which. So my daughter, I was like, okay, there's something going on here, especially homeschooling. You're that close to them all the time. And I had suspected dyslexia, but I didn't know what to do about it. I mean, she was getting along reading good enough, and I didn't know what to do about it anyway. So I just kind of was like, well, she's kind of working it out, so I'm just going to let it go. So I did let it go. Not the best idea, but that's what I did. And then her brother is 4 years younger than her, and he got up into school, and I started teaching him how to read, and he was having an extremely difficult time. Like, he was still in second grade, and his worst letter was H. He did not know H says huh. Like, he kept forgetting that. He could not remember that. Or C, ka. Like, it was so bad. And so at that point, I'm like, something has to be done. Actually, at that point, I thought, I'm a terrible mom. I'm a terrible teacher. I can't teach these kids how to read very well. What am I doing wrong? When really, it wasn't me at all. They had dyslexia, and I just needed to learn what curriculum to give them and what help to give them. So I had questioned a mom who has an older student with dyslexia and asked her if I needed to get my daughter tested. And she said, do not test your children until like high school, because that way they can have the proper testing to get accommodations in college. And so if you do it too soon, then those accommodations won't be accurate, is kind of where she was going with that. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't test my kids because I was thinking I needed to wait till they were in high school. Turns out that is not the case. That is not the case. If you want to test your child, go get your child tested, and the sooner you do it, the better. Public school will even tell you third grade or below, we can't test the kids. They don't need to be tested. That is not true. So let me read what I have from Susan Barton, what she said about it. If you're convinced that your child or student has dyslexia, do you have to get them tested? Now, she said no, but she highly recommends it, even if they're being homeschooled. Although dyslexia is the most common reason a bright student will struggle with reading and spelling or writing composition, it is not the only reason, like I was mentioning. And you need to know why for sure that your child is struggling, and until you know that, you won't know the best way to help them. So the most important reason for getting an accurate diagnosis is to help you pick the correct tutoring program that's going to help that child. That way you don't waste time and money on something that doesn't work for them anyway. So you also might need it as a written diagnostic report that contains the test results and legal language needed to justify having a public school issue a 504 plan with the needed classroom accommodations, as well as a list of specific accommodations that child needs. Okay, so you might need to get them tested, you might not. So let me just say this. I ended up getting my oldest daughter tested, but that's only because I was in a custody battle where the main reason that my ex-husband was holding me up for custody, he was really fighting against the whole education thing. But I knew that as her being a dyslexic student, one-on-one homeschooling was the best thing for her. So I was fighting this battle. But the lawyer that I was using didn't really know how to fight it with that angle, because there was more on the line than that. So I got her tested simply to prove that she truly is dyslexic. Although I knew it in my heart, I needed the papers to prove it. And so I got her tested. I thought she was mild or moderate. She was severe dyslexic. So that was interesting to know. It's also interesting to see the way that her mind works. They never ended up using those papers in my legal battle. And so it was good that she got tested so that we knew, but that's the only reason I got her tested. And then because I was homeschooling them, and I know what's going on, and I know how to give them the accommodations that they need. And I found this program that we're already using, so that part was already being fixed. So I didn't feel like I needed to get them tested. And also, it's very expensive to test them, and insurance doesn't always cover it. Most of the time, tests are in the thousands. And so that's another reason why we're not exactly a rich person here. Like, especially at that time, we were broke. And so I wasn't able to test them even if I wanted to, because I did look into testing my other 3 children, but wow, that was a whopping price. So I did not test them. And so that's how we handled it. But sometimes you might want to test them. As Susan Barton says, she highly recommends it. So let me explain who should not test. Parents, please be aware that, this again is from Susan Barton. Parents, please be aware that using the right test is only half the battle. A person who is not an expert in dyslexia may give the right test, but not know how to correctly interpret the results. That's why testing should be done by a professional who is an expert in dyslexia and who has received intense specialized training how to accurately give and score the test and to interpret the results. Unfortunately, most school psychologists have not had that type of training. Okay, so most of the time they think, oh, the school psychologist will be able to find out if my child has dyslexia. That is not necessarily so. To find out, ask them these questions. What specialized training have you completed that qualifies you to test a child for dyslexia? In fact, you should ask that question before you hire anyone to test your child. Many people know that public schools are required to test children who live in that service area, whether those children attend public school or not. But you may not realize that most public schools do not test your children for dyslexia. They test them to find out if they are eligible for special education services. There's a huge difference between eligibility testing and diagnostic testing. Federal education law does not require public schools to test children for dyslexia. Schools only have to find out if a child is eligible for special education services, and if so, under what category. If a child with dyslexia is eligible, they will be placed in a category called learning disabilities. So before you allow the public school to test your child, ask them these questions. Will you be testing my child for dyslexia? You may be shocked at their answers. Some public schools will give one of the following excuses for not testing a child for dyslexia. They might say, dyslexia is just a catch-all term and there's no test for it. Or, your child is too young to test. Like I said, that's not true. Or, only a doctor can test for dyslexia. Again, not true. Or, dyslexia is not the same thing as a learning disability. None of those statements are true. If you hear comments like that, do not allow them to test your child for dyslexia. Okay, so here's what happened next in my situation with my oldest daughter. So she got tested for dyslexia by someone that was in my state who's actually the president of my state's Dyslexia Association. She got tested by that person, and that person gave me a binder full of the results and explained to me what was going on and it was really interesting, the different ways that my daughter's mind works. Okay, so she was tested by this person. I have these papers. But then my ex-husband, she ended up going to the public school system because he wanted her tested by the school psychologist. So they tested her, and then when we were in the meeting to have her IEP, her individualized educational plan, put together, they never mentioned the word dyslexia at all, not once. And it almost seems like they were careful not to say the word dyslexia. They simply said, because I even asked something about, was it dyslexia or something? I think I said something about it. And they said, your tests were congruent with our tests. That's all they said. And then they gave her accommodations according to that. So, and also so you know, someone who has dyslexia can still fall above the level that they require for someone to have special education. Meaning, there's a lot of kids that fall through the cracks. Even when they test them for special education, they still could have dyslexia, but test above that level of what the school deems that they need some special education. So, that's why I say advocate, make sure that they have the accommodations, make sure they have the best education. Does that mean you switch schools? Does that mean they go to a public school instead of a private, or a private instead of a public because one place does it and the other place doesn't? Does that mean you hire them a tutor? Does that mean you pull them out and homeschool them? Every family situation is different. Please consider the best for your family situation. Okay, so I know that was a lot. We'll try to go through the rest of these a little bit quicker. Let's see here. So I talked about who can test them. Don't say that your kids are being lazy, because it's not true. You're not a bad teacher if you're a homeschooling teacher, or if you are a teacher who is in the public or private school system and you are seeing these kids that are struggling, and maybe the school system that you're in, maybe they got tested and they were one of the kids that fell in the cracks, but you knew that they needed help. It is not your fault at all. So don't think that. One other thing that they say is, oh, shouldn't the child just read more? Just read more and then you'll get it. That's not true. They need to be taught how to decode the words properly. They need to be taught according to the way that their mind works, which is an Orton-Gillingham curriculum. So, oh, the other thing, oh, they'll grow out of it. Don't say they'll grow out of it. They don't grow out of it. As a matter of fact, earlier remediation is the best thing for them. Like if they can start when they're 6 instead of when they're 9 or 12 or 15, that is all the better for the child. And it really damages their self-esteem, especially if they're in public or private school system where they are being compared with their peers. Then it can really be very damaging emotionally on them. So to get their help sooner rather than later is one of the best things to do. Okay, so I try not to make my videos too long, and I think I've covered a lot of stuff. One other thing I want to mention is that, which one is it? Okay, you can find a list of people who test in your area by going to the Susan Barton website and then go to the How to Get Help tab, and you'll find a place where you can click to ask for testers in your area. It'll just come up and you'll ask for your name and your probably think your zip code, and then they'll send you a list of who tests in your area if you were interested in getting your child or your student tested. So there's that information. There's so much more to my story. I didn't hardly cover much at all, but I know that helping out the Barton reading has helped out so much for us to learn how to decode and figure out how to read, to the point to where my 19-year-old who graduated this spring has asked me for the last 2 books. She got to level 8. She completed 8 levels, which is what they asked for you to do in Barton reading. But there are level 9 and 10, which can help you to learn even at a little higher level. She still wants me to review the rules with her sometime, and that's pretty amazing for someone who has graduated from high school to be asking. I started her in middle school to get retrain how to read and spell, which was interesting because I've started with my youngest as soon as he got into kindergarten. So the younger you can get help, the better. But even if they're older, get them help too. Even as adults, they can learn how to read and spell again. I know with using the Barton's reading system, and I'm sure there's other good systems out there too. Okay. If you guys have any questions, or if there's something that you want me to take time to do just a video on that, please let me know. I hope that this has been a help to you. I feel like I have so much more I wanted to say, but again, I don't want to make this video too long. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I hope this blesses so many out there. Thanks. Bye.